At Easter dinner, my daughter-in-law gave me a giant chocolate egg, calling it perfect. Inside, a brochure for the cheapest retirement home. I'm only 55. Her note, the perfect place for you. I simply smiled. Then I revealed my new will, calmly stating everything now went to someone else. Her face drained. If you've ever faced such disrespect, you'll understand. Like, share, and tell us where you were listening from. The aroma of glazed ham and rosemary potatoes usually filled me with warmth and nostalgia on Easter. This year, however, a metallic tang of anticipation coated my tongue, a subtle premonition of discord amidst the forced cheer. We were gathered at my son David's house, a home that once felt welcoming but now carried an undercurrent of tension, mostly due to his wife Bethany. She moved through the room with an almost aggressive sweetness, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. I had learned to read the subtle cues of her performance, and today she was in full theatrical mode. After dessert, when everyone was sated and relaxed, Bethany brought out a gloriously decorated giant chocolate Easter egg, nearly the size of a football. Its shell shimmered with pastel icing and delicate sugar flowers. My granddaughter Lily gasped with delight, thinking it was for her, but Bethany, with a pointed glance at me, said, "No, sweetie, this one is for Nana." She set the egg down in front of me with a flourish, her smile wider than ever. "I picked this out especially for you, Eleanor. I just knew it would be perfect." My son David sat opposite me, nervously picking at a loose thread on his trousers. He wouldn't meet my gaze, his discomfort palpable. He knew. My heart sank, a familiar ache. Beside me, my niece Caroline caught my eye. Her brow was subtly furrowed, a flicker of concern in her usually bright eyes. She had always been perceptive, sensitive to the emotional currents David so often ignored. "Oh, how lovely, Bethany," I said, my voice betraying none of the apprehension swirling within me. I carefully unwrapped the cellophane, the chocolate's rich scent filling the air. It felt almost sacrilegious to break such an exquisite creation. But break it I must. I tapped the thick shell with a butter knife, then again, more firmly. A satisfying crack echoed through the dining room. As the two halves separated, revealing the hollow interior, my breath hitched. Nestled inside, amidst a scattering of foil-wrapped mini eggs that seemed like an afterthought, was not more chocolate, but a glossy brochure. My fingers trembled slightly as I picked it up. The cover featured a generic, idyllic scene, an elderly couple holding hands, strolling through meticulously manicured gardens, beneath a sign that read, "Whispering Pines Retirement Home. Your golden years reimagined." My stomach lurched. Whispering Pine, the county's cheapest, most rundown assisted living facility, notorious for its thin walls and limited amenities. The place everyone in town joked about sending their truly difficult relatives. Attached to the brochure with a silver paperclip was a small, elegant card. In Bethany's distinctive looping script, it read, "The perfect place for you." The words hit me like a physical blow. The perfect place for me. Not a thoughtful gift, not even a passive-aggressive slight, but a blunt, cruel message. I was unwanted. I was a burden. My large home, the one I had shared with David's father for 40 years, the one I had maintained impeccably since his passing, was apparently no longer mine to enjoy. Bethany, observing my stillness, leaned forward, her voice dripping with artificial sympathy. "Eleanor, dear, we've been so worried about you. That big house must be far too much for you to manage alone. All those stairs. And at your age, you should be out enjoying yourself, not constantly cleaning and worrying." She paused, then added with a theatrical sigh, "They have wonderful activities at Whispering Pines. Bridge clubs, knitting circles, even bingo nights. Just imagine all the new friends you could make." My age, I was 55, hardly decrepit. I still work part-time at the library, volunteered at the animal shelter, and maintained a vibrant social life. Her words, framed as concern, were a thinly veiled accusation of helplessness, a calculated attempt to make me feel old and redundant. An oppressive silence descended upon the dining table. The clinking of cutlery, the soft hum of conversation, all ceased. David still wouldn't meet my eyes, his face a canvas of shame and discomfort. But Carolyn, her eyes, usually so vibrant, were runny with a mix of horror and genuine sympathy, a silent plea for me to say something, anything. I felt her unspoken outrage on my behalf, and it gave me a strange strength. A searing rage, cold and precise, ignited within me. But I kept my expression carefully neutral, a slight, almost imperceptible smile playing on my lips. My hand, steady as a surgeon's, reached into my purse, which rested on the chair beside me. I rummaged for a moment, then extracted a thick, sealed envelope. Its weight felt significant, a tangible representation of the decision I had made just a few days prior. I looked directly at Bethany, my gaze unwavering. Her false smile faltered slightly, replaced by a flicker of confusion. With deliberate slowness, I slid the envelope across the polished mahogany table toward her. It stopped just short of her plate, a stark white rectangle against the festive spread. "Thank you, Bethany," I said, my voice clear and even, cutting through the silence like glass. "This Easter egg and your thoughtful note have actually been incredibly illuminating. And as it happens," I continued, gesturing to the envelope, "I have something for you as well. It's a copy of my updated will." Bethany blinked, her eyes darting from the envelope to my face. A small, triumphant smirk began to form on her lips. She probably thought I was finally yielding, leaving everything to David, which would inevitably trickle down to her. Her fingers closed around the envelope, but then I delivered the final, precise blow. "I've decided," I stated, allowing my voice to drop to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the room, "to leave the majority of my estate to Caroline." The smirk vanished from Bethany's face as if wiped clean by an invisible hand. Her skin, usually flushed with the warmth of the room, drained of all color, leaving her ashen and brittle. The envelope slipped from her suddenly nerveless fingers, skittering across the table. I saw the immediate dawning comprehension in her eyes. Not just the loss of potential inheritance, but the humiliation of having it given to Caroline, her long-standing rival, the very person she had dismissed and subtly undermined for years. The look of utter devastation, of defeat, was almost intoxicating. David finally lifted his head. His eyes, wide with shock, met mine. The complicity, the shame, the weak resignation I had seen earlier had vanished, replaced by genuine, horrified surprise. Chaos erupted around the table, a cacophony of gasps, murmurs, and whispered exclamations. Lily, oblivious, began to cry, sensing the sudden tension. I rose from my seat, gracefully, deliberately. "Thank you both for dinner," I said, my voice resonating with a quiet authority I hadn't realized I possessed. "And thank you, Bethany, for the egg. It truly helped me realize exactly where I stand." With my head held high, I turned and walked out of the dining room, leaving the stunned silence and nascent chaos behind. The last thing I saw was Caroline's face, still frozen in shock, but with a new light of something akin to admiration beginning to glimmer in her eyes. Once in my car, the composure I had so carefully maintained began to waver. A hollow triumph filled me, bitter and sweet. Bethany had tried to break me, to cast me aside, to make me feel old and irrelevant. But all she had managed to do was awaken something stronger, something sharper, something I hadn't realized still existed within me. The war had begun, and I had just fired the first definitive shot. The morning after Easter dawned gray and drizzly, mirroring the somber mood that settled over my usually bright kitchen. I sat at the sturdy oak table, the very one where Arthur and I had shared countless breakfasts, reading the paper and planning our days together. 30 years of marriage, a tapestry woven with laughter, quiet understanding, and unwavering support. It had all felt so solid, so eternal, until 2 years ago when he was suddenly, irrevocably gone. Now, the silence in the house often felt less like peace and more like an echoing void. On the table before me lay the shattered remnants of Bethany's cruel Easter egg. The glossy brochure for Whispering Pines peeked out from beneath a pastel-wrapped chocolate, a stark reminder of the previous night's humiliation. The broken shell felt like a metaphor for my family, once whole and cherished, now fractured and scattered. I traced the jagged edge of a chocolate shard, my mind replaying the slow, insidious unraveling that had begun 7 years ago when David first brought Bethany home. She had been so charming then, a delicate blonde with wishy, earnest blue eyes. "I always wanted a mother figure, Eleanor," she'd confided, leaning into me with a warmth that felt genuine. Arthur had been instantly smitten, praising her sweetness, her deference, her apparent adoration of David. Even I, cautious by nature, had initially allowed myself to hope that she would be a wonderful addition to our family. But then the subtle criticisms had begun. "Oh, Eleanor, this wallpaper is so charmingly vintage," she'd remark, her tone implying old-fashioned and drab. Or, "Don't you find those pearls a bit heavy for an everyday look?" My home, my clothes, my preferences, slowly, meticulously, they were all chipped away at, made to feel less than, out of touch. I had brushed it off, attributing it to her youth, her different style. After Arthur's death, however, the gloves had come off. Her subtle manipulations intensified, becoming bolder, more aggressive. She started by subtly isolating me from David. Calls would go unanswered. Visits would be rescheduled last minute, always with a plausible excuse. My family photos, carefully arranged on the mantelpiece, began to disappear, replaced by pictures of Bethany's own, far more modern relatives. Conversations would be twisted, my words reinterpreted, my memories subtly corrected until I started to second-guess myself. I remembered David's last birthday dinner, just a few months ago. I had brought out an old photo album, filled with snapshots of David as a boy, cherishing the memories. Bethany had waved it away with a dismissive hand. "Oh, Eleanor, no one wants to look at those dusty old things now," she had chided, pulling out her phone to show them a collection of professionally shot pictures from their last vacation instead. Later that evening, I'd overheard her whispering to David in the kitchen, her voice low and conspiratorial. "She seemed a little confused tonight, didn't she, dear?" Forgetting things, rambling. The words meant to be unheard had cut deep, planting a seed of doubt that festered. A sharp rap on the front door startled me from my reverie. I knew it had to be Caroline. My heart gave a little lurch of relief. I wasn't alone in this. Caroline stood on my doorstep, her eyes red and puffy, clearly having cried. She looked disheveled, her usually impeccable hair askew. "Aunt Eleanor," she choked out, rushing into my arms as soon as I opened the door. "I am so sorry. I can't believe she did that. It was absolutely appalling." We moved to the living room and she sank onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. "David called me this morning," she explained, her voice muffled. "He's beside himself, but Bethany is spinning this whole thing. She's telling him you're being vindictive, that you're just upset because she's finally is suggesting you get the care you need. She even said you might have early dementia, that this radical change to your will is proof." My blood ran cold. Early dementia. It wasn't just about pushing me out of the house. It was about destroying my credibility, about discrediting me in David's eyes so he wouldn't question her motives. The realization struck me with the force of a physical blow. She wasn't just trying to replace me. She was trying to erase me. "The will is real, Carolyn," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. "I changed it last month. I'd been contemplating it for a while, ever since Arthur's funeral, frankly. Bethany seemed to be measuring for curtains while I was still grieving. But her behavior has escalated so much recently. I finally went to see Mr. Henderson, the lawyer, and made it official." Caroline nodded, her expression grim. "That explains why Bethany was so focused on trying to show David all those memory care apartments last month. I overheard her talking about them to him. She made them sound so nice, like luxury resorts. But I looked them up. They were all places like Whispering Pines. Memory care apartments, I echoed, the pieces clicking into place. So the Easter egg wasn't just a cruel joke. It was a warning shot, an acceleration of her plan. She was trying to break me down, make me feel worthless, so I'd willingly go along with her suggestions. My hands clenched into fists in my lap. The rage I had suppressed the night before now bubbled to the surface, but this time it was a cold, determined fury. "I'm done being silent, Caroline," I declared, my voice trembling slightly with emotion. "I'm done letting her walk all over me, manipulate my son, and disrespect the memory of Arthur. If Bethany wants a fighter for this family, she's going to get one." As Caroline looked at me, a flicker of hope replacing the devastation in her eyes, I quietly ran my thumb over the edge of a document folded neatly in my pocket. It wasn't the will. This was something else entirely, something I had stumbled upon almost by accident, proof of Bethany's own hidden financial problems, her secret desperation. It was a card I had held close to my chest, a final, devastating blow, ready to be revealed when the time was right. I knew this wouldn't be easy. Bethany was cunning, but she had underestimated me. She had underestimated the strength of a mother's love and the steel that lay beneath a grieving widow's quiet exterior. Weeks after that tumultuous Easter dinner, a fragile calm had settled, but it was a deceptive one. The air between David and me was strained, punctuated by polite but distant calls. Bethany remained a shadowy presence, her silence more unnerving than her previous barbs. I found solace in Caroline's company, her unwavering support a balm to my bruised spirit. One afternoon, Caroline and I were polishing my grandmother's heirloom silverware, a cherished collection passed down through generations. I'd inherited it from my mother, who had received it from her own mother. Each intricately engraved piece told a story, a tangible link to my family's past. As we meticulously cleaned the forks and spoons, Caroline paused, a puzzled frown creasing her brow. "Aunt Eleanor," she said, holding up a small dessert fork, "isn't this set supposed to have 12 place settings? I only count 11 of these." I looked at the tray. Indeed, there was a noticeable gap. My grandmother's silver, always meticulously counted and stored, was incomplete. "That's odd," I murmured, a prickle of unease starting in my stomach. I distinctly remember 12. As the days turned into weeks, Caroline's observation gnawed at me. I began to notice other small discrepancies. A particular crystal vase, a gift from Arthur on our 10th anniversary, seemed to have vanished from the display cabinet. A beloved porcelain figurine, a tiny robin perched on a branch, was no longer in its usual spot on the bookshelf. Initially, I dismissed these occurrences, blaming my own forgetfulness, my grief-addled mind, perhaps even the natural disarray of an older home. I found myself thinking, am I really losing my memory? Then Caroline, ever practical, offered a chilling alternative. "What if," she suggested gently one afternoon, her voice hesitant, "what if someone is taking these things, Aunt Eleanor? Not just for the value, but to make it seem like you're forgetful? It would certainly benefit Bethany if David believed you were declining." Her words sent a cold shiver down my spine. The pieces began to click into place, forming a disturbing mosaic. That night, sleep eluded me. I rose from my bed and, armed with a flashlight and a newfound sense of purpose, began an exhaustive inventory of my home. The silence of the night amplified the dread growing within me. By dawn, the evidence was undeniable. My pearl earrings, a gift from Arthur after David was born, were gone from their velvet box. An antique silver locket containing a tiny photograph of my parents was missing. Photo albums, the very ones Bethany had dismissed, now had empty slots, pictures carefully excised from their pages. Even smaller things. My favorite reading glasses often weren't where I swore I'd left them. My address book, usually tucked into a specific drawer, would sometimes appear on a different shelf or even in a kitchen cupboard. These weren't the scattered habits of an aging woman. This was a pattern, deliberate and calculated, designed to erode my confidence and, more importantly, David's trust in my lucidity. A few days later, the phone rang. It was David. His voice, usually warm and familiar, sounded stiff, formal. Mom, he began. "Bethany and I would like you to come over for dinner this Friday. Just us. We have some important things to discuss." His personal invitation, rather than Bethany's usual terse text, made me agree, albeit with a heavy heart. I knew what was coming. Friday evening arrived, cloaked in a sense of foreboding. As I walked through the door of David's house, Bethany greeted me with a smile that stretched her lips but left her eyes cold and distant. "Eleanor, darling, so glad you found your way here. And the drive wasn't too much for you, was it? We were a little worried you might get lost." The patronizing tone was unmistakable, a subtle jab meant to undermine my competence from the outset. Dinner was an exercise in passive aggression. Every time I offered an opinion or recounted a small anecdote, Bethany would interject, her voice sweet but firm. If I mentioned a detail about my day, she would correct me. "Oh no, Eleanor, you mean Tuesday, not Wednesday, don't you?" If I tried to explain a decision I'd made, she'd gently but firmly rephrase it, making it sound more confused, more indecisive than it actually was. David sat in silence, occasionally glancing at me, his discomfort a heavy presence at the table. Each small correction, each seemingly insignificant misstatement was magnified by Bethany, twisted into proof of my supposed decline. Over dessert, David cleared his throat, his gaze fixed on the swirling coffee in his cup. "Mom," he began, his voice laced with an uncomfortable nervousness. "Bethany and we've been talking. We're concerned about your forgetfulness lately. And, well, your confusion." My spine stiffened. "David, I am not confused," I stated, my voice firm. "I'm perfectly capable." Bethany, however, smoothly cut in. "Oh, Eleanor, don't you remember, just last week when we were talking about the Hendersons, you completely mixed up their daughter with their niece. You called one by the other's name, and then you couldn't quite remember where they lived." It was true, I had momentarily mixed them up, a common enough slip of the tongue, but Bethany made it sound like a catastrophic memory lapse. David nodded solemnly, his expression confirming that he had absorbed Bethany's narrative. Then David finally looked up, his eyes meeting mine, filled with a mixture of pity and a strange, cold resolve. "Mom, we think it might be time to consider downsizing, selling the house." My breath caught in my throat. Downsizing, selling my home. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. Bethany's eyes, across the table, glittered with an undeniable triumph. It was a look I would never forget. David, encouraged by her silent signal, continued, outlining their agenda in a voice that was eerily calm, almost rehearsed. They would help me sell my home, relocate me to a senior living community, a euphemism I knew for a place like Whispering Pines, and even manage my finances, for my own good, of course. Stunned, I could only nod, a wordless acceptance of the fate they were so diligently weaving for me. David insisted on driving me home, and I let him. The journey was silent, punctuated only by the hum of the engine. My mind reeled. It wasn't just about pushing me aside anymore. They were trying to take everything. My home, my independence, my very dignity. The fight I had promised Caroline was no longer just a desire. It was an imperative. After David dropped me off, leaving me with the chilling echo of their plan, I didn't go to bed. The house, usually a source of comfort, now felt like a cage they were preparing for me. My mind was a whirlwind of anger, fear, and a fierce primal instinct to protect what was mine. I walked straight to my small home office, a sanctuary where Arthur and I had managed our affairs. With a precise click, I unlocked the bottom drawer of my old filing cabinet. Inside, tucked away beneath old tax returns and insurance policies, was a manila folder thick with documents. I had started it 6 months ago, a quiet, almost subconscious act of self-preservation, spurred by the growing unease I felt about Bethany's behavior. I had dismissed it then as paranoia, the worries of an aging mother. Now it felt like a lifeline. I spread the contents across my desk, bank statements detailing erratic and increasingly large expenditures, phone records that showed frequent calls to numbers I didn't recognize, culminating in a series of urgent, late-night conversations. A confidential background check I'd had discreetly run, revealing a history Bethany had carefully concealed. The evidence, painstakingly gathered, painted a damning portrait. Bethany wasn't just cruel, she was desperate. Her perfect life, the one she so carefully curated for David and their friends, was a mirage built on a shaky foundation of astronomical credit card debt, multiple undisclosed loans, and a precarious financial existence. She wasn't just after my home. She needed my assets, my financial stability, to prop up her failing facade. A cold clarity settled over me. I had been foolish, perhaps even blind. I had trusted too much, dismissed too many red flags, always giving her the benefit of the doubt for David's sake. The grief for Arthur had also clouded my judgment, making me vulnerable to her machinations. But no more, the fight had been forced upon me, and I would fight back with every fiber of my being. I picked up my phone, my fingers steady. "Worse than I imagined," I texted Carolyn. "We need to talk tomorrow." Game on. The words felt stark, definitive. This wasn't a skirmish, it was a full-blown war for my life. The next morning, Carolyn arrived early, her face etched with worry. I had barely offered her coffee before she cut to the chase, her voice tight with suppressed anger. Aunt Eleanor, she said, her directness a bracing tonic. I've been doing some digging. They're trying to declare you incompetent, legally. My heart sank, a familiar heavy dread. The words resonated with the conversation I'd had with David and Bethany, the insidious hints and accusations. Incompetent, I whispered, the absurdity of it almost laughable, yet the seriousness of the implication chilling. Carolyn nodded grimly. Yes, Bethany has been systematically documenting your memory issues. Those little slips she exaggerates, the misplaced items, even the Henderson's daughter incident. And she's been consulting an elder law attorney. She's building a case, Aunt Eleanor. They want to argue you're no longer capable of managing your affairs, so they can take over. But I am competent, I protested, my voice rising with indignation. I run my own life, manage my own finances, work part-time. This is ridiculous. I know, Aunt Eleanor, Carolyn said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. But Bethany has been poisoning David's perception for years. He sees what she wants him to see. We have to fight fire with fire. And I have the fire, I declared, pushing back from the table. Come into my office. I led her to my desk, motioning towards the spread of documents. Carolyn's eyes widened as she scanned the pages. She picked up a credit card statement, her breath hissing between her teeth. Aunt Eleanor, this is astronomical. She has almost $200,000 in credit card debt. And look at these withdrawals from David's joint account. Thousands, in cash every month for the last year. I pointed to another document. And that's not all. The background check revealed she's declared bankruptcy not once, but twice before she even met David. She never told him. Carolyn's face was a study in shock, her initial anger giving way to disbelief. This is damning, Aunt Eleanor. My God, she's been living a complete lie. She looked at me, then back at the documents. But David, he won't believe it. Not yet. He's too deep in her web. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of Bethany's deception pressing down on us. Then with renewed resolve, we began to outline our counter strategy. First, I said, my voice steady, I need to go back to Mr. Henderson, my lawyer. I need to update all my legal documents. My will, my power of attorney, my healthcare directive, all of it. And I'm naming you, Caroline, as my sole representative instead of David. Carolyn nodded, her expression serious. Good. That protects you immediately. Second, I continued, I will undergo a full neurological workup and comprehensive cognitive testing. I want an independent medical evaluation to unequivocally document my mental competence. No one will be able to argue against the doctor's diagnosis. Excellent idea, Caroline agreed, scribbling notes on a pad. Third, and this will be the most painful, I said, my voice tinged with sadness, I need to start untangling all my financial connections to David and Bethany. Any investments, any informal loans I've made to them over the years, anything at all. It all needs to be formalized or withdrawn. I need to protect what I have left. We looked at the pile of documents detailing Bethany's hidden debt. We hold on to this for now, I decided. This is our ultimate weapon, but using it feels like declaring open war, and I want to avoid that if possible, at least until we've secured my position. Carolyn nodded, understanding. We prepare for the worst, Aunt Eleanor, but hope for a less destructive path. This is going to be a battle, but you're not alone. And for the first time in a long time, I truly believed her. I was ready. The story you're hearing is far from over. If you've ever felt betrayed or had to fight for your dignity, then you know this isn't just my story. It's a testament to resilience. Keep watching to see how this unfolds. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to follow the rest of my journey. Your support means the world. Over the next 2 weeks, Caroline and I moved with a focused intensity, like generals planning a campaign. We met with Mr. Henderson, my lawyer, who efficiently drafted new legal documents, establishing trust that would be difficult for anyone to challenge. My will was finalized, naming Caroline as my primary beneficiary and executor, with safeguards in place to ensure my wishes would be carried out. I underwent a comprehensive neurological workup and a battery of cognitive tests, each session affirming my sound mental capacity. Throughout this whirlwind of legal and medical appointments, I maintained a facade of normalcy with David and Bethany, enduring their calls and polite inquiries, knowing the storm was gathering. Carolyn often remarked on my transformation. "You're stronger now, Aunt Eleanor," she'd say, watching me review a complex legal document with a steady hand. My response was always the same. They left me no choice. The woman who had quietly mourned Arthur for 2 years, occasionally second-guessing herself, had been replaced by someone sharper, more resolute. Then, one crisp autumn afternoon, the doorbell rang. My heart gave a sudden, hard thump against my ribs. I looked through the peephole. It was David, alone. His shoulders seemed heavier, the lines on his face deeper than I remembered, etched with an unfamiliar blend of apprehension and weary resolve. The long-awaited confrontation had arrived. Caroline, who had been reviewing some papers with me in the living room, instantly sensed the shift. She quickly gathered the folder of documents and slipped quietly into the kitchen, a silent anchor. "Stay calm, Aunt Eleanor," she whispered, her eyes meeting mine, a silent promise of support. I opened the door. David hesitated on the threshold, then stepped inside, his gaze sweeping over the familiar living room, lingering on the mantelpiece where my original family photos had once been. "Mom," he began, his voice strained, almost a whisper. "We need to talk. It's about the will." I maintained a neutral expression, my face a carefully constructed mask. "Oh? And what exactly did I do, David?" I asked, my voice even, betraying nothing of the tumult inside me. He ran a hand through his hair, agitated. "You cut me out, Mom. You cut me completely out. Why would you do that? It's just not like you. Ever since Dad passed, you've been so forgetful. And with these paranoid accusations you keep making against Bethany." His voice trailed off, a familiar script delivered with an undercurrent of genuine distress. I held up a hand, stopping him. "David," I interrupted, my voice firm but not accusatory. "Let's be clear. Bethany has been systematically removing items from my home, twisting my conversations, and deliberately trying to make me appear confused." He scoffed, his face reddening. "Mom, those are just conspiracy theories. Bethany would never do anything like that. She loves you. She's just worried about you." "She loves my money, David," I stated, the words cutting through the air. "She loves the idea of my house, my assets. She doesn't love me." He looked genuinely hurt, bewildered. "That's not fair, Mom. You don't know what you're saying." I took a deep breath. This was it, the moment of truth. "David Oshoy," I said, motioning towards the sofa. "Please, sit down. I have something I need you to look at. And I need you to look at it not as Bethany's husband, but as my son. The son I raised, the son I always taught to be fair and to see the truth." He sat, albeit reluctantly, on the edge of the cushion. I went to the kitchen and retrieved the thick manila folder from Caroline's hands. As I placed it on the coffee table between us, David's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, then slowly, agonizingly, to dawning horror as he opened it. His eyes darted across the pages, absorbing the irrefutable evidence. He saw the credit card statements detailing Bethany's staggering $87,000 debt. He saw the meticulously documented cash withdrawals from their joint account, clearly made by Bethany. His face crumpled as he understood the depth of the deception. "There's more, David," I said gently, handing him another document. His face paled further as he read the private investigator's report, detailing Bethany's 2 previous marriages, both to wealthy, significantly older men who had conveniently passed away, leaving her with substantial inheritances before she moved on to David. She had meticulously hidden her past from him. He looked up at me, his eyes wide, disbelieving. "Mom, I am not confused, David. I am not paranoid," I stated, my voice steady. "I have undergone extensive neurological workups and cognitive testing by independent specialists. I have their reports. I am fully competent, mentally sound, and perfectly capable of managing my own affairs." I paused, then added, "And those missing pieces of my grandmother's silverware? They're in the guest room closet at your house, tucked away behind the spare blankets, along with the crystal vase and the porcelain robin." His jaw dropped. He looked utterly shattered. "I changed my will, David, not out of spite, but out of self-preservation," I continued, the raw truth pouring out. "Because Bethany, with your unwitting help, was planning to declare me incompetent, sell my home, take my assets, and place me in a senior community like Whispering Pines. David flinched, as if physically struck. The color drained from his face, leaving him ghostly white. He couldn't meet my gaze. He was silent for a long moment, the only sound the rustling of papers in his trembling hands. Finally, he closed the folder, his voice hoarse. I, I need to think, Mom. I need to talk to Bethany. When she denies it all, David, I said, my eyes holding his. When she spins every single one of those facts into a lie, or blames me, or calls me vindictive, remember that I have never, not once in your entire life, lied to you. He nodded, a barely perceptible movement, then slowly rose and walked out the door, leaving me with the silence and the lingering scent of his shock. Carolyn emerged from the kitchen, her expression a mix of concern and quiet triumph. We sat together in the living room, not speaking, simply absorbing the aftermath. I didn't know if David would believe me, if decades of Bethany's subtle manipulation could be undone in one painful conversation. But as I sat there, a profound sense of peace settled over me. I had told him the truth, laid bare the deception. Whatever happened next, my conscience was clear. 6 months later, the autumn air carried a gentle crispness, rustling through the leaves of the old oak in my front yard. I sat on my porch swing, a cup of herbal tea warming my hands, a profound sense of peace settling over me. The afternoon sun, mellow and golden, dappled through the branches, painting shifting patterns on the weathered wood. It was the peace of a battle won, a life reclaimed, and an authentic freedom that tasted sweeter than any inheritance. Carolyn joined me, settling into the chair beside the swing. Her presence had become a constant, comforting anchor in my life. "Beautiful day, Aunt Eleanor," she murmured, taking a sip of her own tea. "It is," I agreed, a soft smile touching my lips. "Reminds me of days Arthur and I would spend out here planting our garden." I paused, then looked at her. "You know, it still feels surreal, doesn't it? Everything that happened." Carolyn nodded, especially with David. 3 days after that agonizing conversation with David, he had returned. His face had been ashen-faced and exhausted, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. "Mom," he had said, his voice raw, "you were right about everything." He had found the missing silverware exactly where I said it would be. He had confronted Bethany with the financial records, which, to his credit, he had independently verified through his bank and a trusted financial advisor. The final crushing blow had been discovering Bethany was already meeting with realtors, not just to downsize my house, but to put it on the market without my knowledge. He had even found the forged signatures she intended to use. He confessed he didn't even know who she was anymore, I recounted to Caroline, the memory still fresh. He said he felt like he'd been living with a stranger. It was heartbreaking to hear, but also a relief. The ensuing divorce proceedings had been vicious. Bethany, cornered and desperate, had fought tooth and nail, initially attempting to paint me as a senile or bitter old woman. But her leverage evaporated when her previous marriages and financial deceptions, meticulously documented by Caroline and me, came to light. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the threat of severe legal repercussions, she had eventually accepted a modest settlement, enough to disappear, taking her toxic manipulations with her. She vanished from our lives as suddenly as she had appeared, leaving behind a wake of shattered trust and broken hearts. David had moved into a smaller apartment, a quiet, simple place. He began seeing a therapist, slowly untangling himself from the years of Bethany's psychological grip. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, he began to return to the man he had been before, the kind, earnest son I knew. Our relationship, once fractured, was tentatively healing, built on new foundations of honesty and a painful understanding. "Speaking of new foundations," Carolyn said, breaking my reverie, "what about the will, Aunt Eleanor? Has David come to terms with it?" I smiled, a genuine, untroubled smile. "He has. We talked about it extensively. David will inherit the business interests that Arthur had always wanted him to have, a separate portfolio designed for his career. He's taking over some of my investments in a way that truly helps him, without being punitive." I paused, then continued, "But as for the house and half of my personal assets, that will still go to you, my dear. Not as punishment for David, but as recognition. recognition of your unwavering loyalty, your sharp mind, and the true family you've always been to me. Just then, a car pulled into the driveway. It was David, and to my delight, he wasn't alone. With him was Frank, Arthur's old fishing buddy, a man whose booming laugh and endless supply of tall tales had always brightened our home. Seeing Frank brought a flood of warm, cherished memories, a tangible link to a happier past. We all gathered on the porch, sharing stories about Arthur, laughing over old jokes, and reminiscing about summers spent by the lake. David seemed lighter, a genuine smile on his face, free from the burdens he had carried for so long. He caught my eye, a look of understated gratitude passing between us, a silent acknowledgement of the long journey we had both undertaken. Before they left, David handed me a gift wrapped in simple brown paper. Inside, nestled in gleaming silver, was a picture frame. It held a cherished old photograph of himself, Arthur, and me taken years ago, all of us laughing, our faces open and joyful. It was one of the photos Bethany had deliberately hidden from view. "Mom," David said, his voice thick with emotion, "I'm so sorry. For everything, for not seeing what was happening, for letting her blind me." I reached out and gently squeezed his hand. "We both lost our way for a while, David," I assured him, my eyes welling up with a mix of sadness and profound love. "But we found it again, and that's what truly matters." Later that evening, gathered around my dining table, Caroline, David, Frank, and I felt a profound sense of peace, my small, authentic family. The cruel chocolate Easter egg, the brochure for Whispering Pines, the years of manipulation and betrayal, all felt like a distant, unpleasant dream. I had faced the darkness, faced the betrayal, and emerged stronger, wiser, and surrounded by a love that was real and true. As the evening drew to a close, I raised my glass, a quiet toast. "To family," I said, my voice clear and steady. "Not just by blood, but by loyalty, by honesty, and by heart. And to the true inheritance," I added, looking at David and Caroline, "which is not money or property, but resilience, dignity, and the courage to stand firm in your own truth." They raised their glasses, their eyes shining, understanding. My legacy would be one of integrity, not just assets.